Well, when in Rome. Right, that is way too hot, so we're not going to keep that on. And I was going to do this massive history section for Ireland, and I wrote the whole thing out and then realised, oh boy, it's quite big, because Irish history is quite big. So to keep things moving, we're going to cut this down and do an ethnocentric version to keep things short. And for the Irish, history is an odd one, because Ireland is basically geographically isolated from Europe, being all the way out in the west, which means European affairs either came last or never to the island of Ireland. For example, the Roman Empire just comes and goes, and the Irish barely notice, except for this guy named Patrick turning up to tell them about Jesus. That's it. Eventually the Normans would conquer the Anglo-Saxons, and then some idiot decided to invite the Normans to help him claim the throne of Ireland from some other petty Irish king. And so the Normans decided to help this Irishman by taking over most of the island, and eventually conquer all of the island of Ireland, and then dub the entire place the Kingdom of Ireland, with this kingdom being inherently inherited by the King of England. Solves that problem. Although at this point, what really happened is that Ireland became England's first colony for the entire Imperial project. And as the first colony, well, you need colonists. So what they decided to do is take the previous Irish nobles' land that had been taken and hand that off to new English settlers in a series of colonization attempts which are known as plantations. And pretty much all of them failed. The reason they failed is because the native Irish basically murdered the colonists every single time. Except from one plantation which did succeed, which is the plantation of Ulster by Scots. And these people became known as the Ulster Scots. And these people brought their dialect of English, Scots, which then changed in Ulster to become Ulster Scots, which is that version of Scots we talked about before that only God himself can understand. When the English Civil War kicked off, over in Ireland, the Catholic Irish decided to unify, what power they did have left, into a Irish Confederate rebellion. The result was that Oliver Cromwell ended up turning up, defeating them in battle, which then led to a guerrilla campaign, the return of the plague, and ultimately 20% of the island's population being wiped out. Pretty soon after this, Scotland and England would end up joining in the Act of Union, so you had one country effectively, being Great Britain, and they even got their flags to combine into this new wonderful flag. And the Irish, seeing that happen, didn't want to be a part of it. And so the Irish Protestants and Catholics united to form the United Irishmen, a movement and organization which had witnessed the revolutions of the American Revolution and the French Revolution, and wanted to form some kind of Irish republic of their own. And the response from London was to declare them a terrorist organization, which ultimately led to a rebellion in 1798, and the United Irishmen were crushed, with Ireland pretty shortly after being integrated into this new country, the United Kingdom, it no longer being the United Kingdom of Great Britain, but now being the United Kingdom of Great Britain, the island, and Ireland, the island next door, to form the flag that we all know and love today. Most of us. And in theory, this could have worked. except that in 1845, a fungus from the United States that was wiping out potatoes transported itself via ships to Europe. And you get the European-wide famine and potato blight, which wipes out a huge portion of Europe's potatoes. And most countries had a huge problem with this, but Ireland in particular, was really reliant on the potato because it's a wonder crop. And what ended up happening is 50% of the crop of all of Ireland was wiped out in that year. Big problem. Now, Ireland was no stranger to crop failures. In the 106 years before the blight appeared, there were 24 crop failures. So that's a 22% failure rate. But this was never really a problem because Ireland always produced way more food than it consumed. And the solution, whenever there was a crop failure, was just to close the ports to exports, so that the food that was being produced could just feed the people who lived there. However, in 1845, when the potato blight hit, the solution from the administration was not to close the ports, because they were caught up in ideas of free markets, and that the free market would just supply food from mainland Britain to Ireland, so why interfere with markets? This was a mistake. There was also the issue of just importing food from outside of the British market to Ireland. This was impossible thanks to an extremely difficult tariff regime that had been brought in, known as the Corn Laws. In fact, the situation was such a mess that the ethnically English Conservative Party Prime Minister decided to secretly import 100,000 British pounds of cornmeal in secret, so no one would know about it. And then in public, he would go around trying to get the tariff regime repealed so that they could import food to relieve the famine. And in response, the establishment in London removed him from power. The following year, an English Liberal Prime Minister was put in place, and he genuinely believed that the free market would just provide, in a year in which crop failures had now hit 75% of crops in Ireland. And very quickly, as things spiraled out of control, they realized their mistake and then organized relief efforts, taking out huge government loans, setting up charity organizations, and then importing food by repealing the tariff regime and having the Royal Navy deployed to ship the food into Ireland. But the famine ended up taking the population of Ireland from 8 million to 4 million, with 1 million dead and the rest fleeing throughout all of the British Empire to escape the hunger. Now, all of Europe did have this problem of the blight taking out their crops, but Ireland's particular reliance on the potato as their crop of choice, the decision not to close the ports by the local administration, and the lackluster response from London meant that this was a catastrophe, and the island's population still has not returned to the original 8 million odd inhabitants before the famine. And although the famine was a complete disaster for London, as well as all of humanity, it was not good, but useful for Irish nationalists to claim that this was evidence of how Ireland cannot be governed by the British, they're useless at it, and also they don't care about us, and we should govern ourselves, with Irish nationalist MP Charles Parnell going to the United States and giving a speech in which he said that the Tsar of Russia gave, as did the Sultan of Turkey, but Queen Victoria sent nothing. Now, of course, none of this was true, because if it was, the death toll would have been a hell of a lot higher if the British want to actually exterminate the Irish. And you can see this in the fact that the British were the number one source of aid being raised to save the Irish, primarily through British Quakers and the British Relief Association, raising over £500,000 from the time to relieve the famine. And there were also relief efforts from all over the world. For example, the second largest being from the United States, with the US president donating $50 and Abraham Lincoln even donating $10, with one surprise donation from the Choctaw Nation donating $170. The third largest was from Imperial India, mostly Irish soldiers in the East India Company, but also local Hindus as fellow British subjects. Every significant European state sent aid, including the Russian Tsar Alexander II, and £1,000 from the Ottoman Sultan of Turkey. Queen Elizabeth, far from donating nothing, donated £2,000, with her husband Albert donating another £500, and they sent a message to every church in the entire empire to raise money for Ireland to save them from the famine. And that £2,000 donation made her the single largest donator of money as aid to relieve the famine. Now, most of these lies have died out and become old myths from an era in which they're, isn't relevant anymore in terms of them being politically useful. However, some still do persist. In fact, there was one which I was told long before I visited Ireland, and one I was told multiple times in the country, which is that of the Ottoman Sultan wishing to donate £10,000, but was talked down by the ambassador to donate less than Queen Victoria to not seem as an insult. And there was also the fact that he sent 3 ships filled with food from the Ottoman Empire to Ireland, which were either intercepted by the Royal Navy or secretly delivered the food, so to not embarrass the British Empire. And this story is very popular on Reddit, very popular on Turkish websites and Irish websites. However, it is not true. Now, these stories online come with all kinds of caveats which show you that it's clearly a myth, with some places, for example, claiming that the local symbol of where the food was delivered, the football club there, uses an Ottoman symbol, which is no, it's not true. It's from the Old English king. But then there's also the evidence of what happened in reality. Well, what is it? Well, it's a single letter which exists in the Ottoman archives, in which the nobles of Ireland sent a thank you letter to the Sultan for his £1,000 donation, with no mention of ships. Newspaper reports at the time, such as the Aberdeen News, when it mentions a £1,000 donation, with no mention of ships. The Dublin Chronicle also mentions a 1,000 lira donation with no ships. The word lira meaning pounds, the same word. So the word in Turkish and the word in English are the same thing. Which, if he donated in lira and not in British pounds, that would be 1,200 British pounds at the time. As for if the Sultan wanted to donate £10,000, the sources for this claim are not great. In fact, when I tried to dig into this, I ended up on history forums which referenced old American newspapers, which are said to have been the first places to mention this. And when I went and tracked down those newspapers, there wasn't even a mention of Ireland in the newspaper that was sourced. So frankly, from the research I've conducted, all I can conclude is that it's most likely another one of those rumors that was very useful for Irish republicanism, but there's no real evidence for. But regardless of British aid efforts, London had utterly failed. And after this, the demand for home rule, that the Irish should take care of their own internal affairs, exploded, with the Irish Home Rule Party gaining a huge amount of seats in the 1874 elections, and then election after election they would just expand that domain. This may very well have happened peacefully, except as they were debating the issue, World War I happened. Now, at the outbreak of World War I, home rule put on the back burner. Not going to talk about that for the duration of the war. And most of the Irish population and the army decided, fair enough. So they supported the war effort in the hope that their support would be rewarded with Irish home rule at the end of the war. Some did not take this view, and some Irish Republicans decided to stage a 1916 Easter Rising, taking control of the post office in Dublin, and they were utterly crushed. The leaders of the 1916 revolution were executed, and then after the war, it turned out World War I was entirely a massive bloodshed program which achieved nothing, made people quite radical. And so when the elections were held after the war, the Irish Republican Socialist Sinn Féin won almost all of the seats in Ireland. That was a disaster for London, but what was even more of a disaster was that these new Sinn Féin members of Parliament decided they weren't going to take their seats in the London Parliament. In fact, to hell with you, we're going to set up our own Parliament and declare our independence, whether you like it or not, and deploy the Irish Republican Army to fight for it. Britain, in response, deployed 40,000 troops to Ireland to try and crush this rebellion. However, they found their authority utterly collapsed outside of Dublin and some areas in the north, which still support staying with Britain. And the reason for this is no small part thanks to the fact that the troops were incredibly poor quality. They even massacred a bunch of civilians at a Gaelic football match. These troops were nicknamed the Black and Tans after the uniforms, which were a complete hodgepodge of stuff put together, thanks to the fact that after the First World War, even though Britain had won, it was in a just awful situation. even having to deploy tanks back on the mainland to suppress worker strikes. Throughout all of this, Protestants in the north and the south became targets, and London decided enough's enough, and so offered peace talks, with Sinn Féin sending Michael Collins to negotiate a peace treaty. And when he came back, the offer from the British was for Ireland to become a dominion, the same as Canada, and the British were to keep their naval ports and the north of Ireland. And so Sinn Féin had to debate this and whether or not they would accept this treaty as a stepping stone to independence, with those voting for the treaty, led by Michael Collins, winning the vote, with a minority of Sinn Féin, led by Eamon de Valera, deciding that, no, we're not going to accept this treaty. And so, as Michael Collins accepted the peace treaty, with the Irish Free State being born, the anti-treaty Sinn Féin declared war on the Irish Free State. And so the Irish have their own civil war, which they don't really like to talk about because it's a rather grim affair, with Michael Collins being killed and turned into a national hero, and the anti-treaty side losing. And so de Valera, after losing the civil war, re-enters politics under the party Fianna Fáil and leads the country from its dominion status to proper independence, using that as a stepping stone, as Michael Collins intended. And during World War II, he uses that independence to remain neutral throughout the entire war. Meanwhile, Northern Ireland, because it still belongs to the British, gets hit in the Blitz. What happens post-war is kind of messy and complicated, and I don't want to get into it, but what's important is that the anti-treaty elements of Irish republicanism decide to turn to violence, and they say that they're going to violently resist the British, who are occupying Northern Ireland, and kick them out with violence, setting up the Provisional and Official IRA, with the Socialist Official IRA turning to guerrilla warfare, being funded by the Soviets and North Korea, funnily enough. And as a side note, North Korea, before the peace treaty was signed in the 90s, did actually send a troupe of singers to the Republic of Ireland to come and sing Irish Republican songs in English. Just a weird tidbit. Meanwhile, the Provisional IRA get their funding from Irish Americans and, of all places, Libya, and then decide that they're going to make this a very sectarian, deciding to recruit Irish Republicans who wanted to go after the Protestants, which means that you not only have this ethnic conflict between Ulster Scots and Irish, and also a political conflict about whether or not you should stay with Britain, but then now a sectarian conflict between the two sects of Christianity. And so the Ulster Scot Protestants decide to set up their own paramilitaries to defend themselves and fight back against the IRA. And so the British decide to deploy the military, with the official reason to stop both sides from creating terrorist groups and killing each other. The hell is wrong with you people? And at first, this is somewhat welcomed as a stabilizing force. And pretty soon, well, the Irish Republicans decided that the British military were actually a force to keep the status quo. So, as the British military decided to put up peace walls, separating the Catholics and Protestant communities from each other, the Irish Republicans decided this was unacceptable. An occupation of Northern Ireland, continued occupation from the British oppressors, so declared war on the British Army. The net effect was a hell of a lot more bombings, a hell of a lot more shootings, an attempt on the British Prime Minister on the mainland.
To Mrs. Thatcher, the IRA said, "You have to be lucky every time. We have to be lucky only once."
And bombings on the mainland to cause financial damage, to increase the financial cost of staying in Northern Ireland, with British authority collapsing as snipers ambushed their patrols travelling through the country. The British military turned to helicopters to move about the country, only to be shot down by missile launchers. And the situation got worse and worse and worse, until the British military decided, this isn't worth it, this isn't working, and decided to withdraw from Northern Ireland, with peace talks commencing between the British government and the different factions in Northern Ireland, with the idea being that they would no longer go about politics by killing each other, but instead would do it through peaceful means, the ballot box. This peace treaty being the Good Friday Agreement, and there is the odd bombing every now and again, pipe bomb, the odd shooting, but people just kind of ignore Ireland from the mainland, from their consciousness, if they can help it. And so, since then, the Republic of Ireland did incredibly well, becoming a tax haven, and became very rich on paper, and then got wiped out by the 2008 financial crisis. So I wanted to go and see what the hell was going on over there. Now, at the time of travel, my passport was being processed by an embassy trying to get a visa, and so you might think I'd be a bit of a problem. But thankfully, if you want to travel from the United Kingdom to Ireland, or vice versa, you can do so. Even though the United Kingdom left the European Union, I can go on a driving license, on a plane, through immigration with a driving license. So, I got a plane and went. Naturally, we begin with breakfast, which in England is a full English, in Scotland, a full Scottish, and over in Ireland, specifically Northern Ireland, they have the Ulster Fry, which is basically the same as the full Scottish, but without the haggis, and instead they have something called soda bread, which they add to the mix. Fuck me. Because these people are Scots. Ulster Scots. Ulster also has the Ulster Stack, which is basically an entire breakfast squashed between either soda or potato bread, both of which are genuinely the best way to eat breakfast I've found on Earth.
As ridiculous, but I love it.
Whereas down in the Republic of Ireland, they have their own thing going on, this being the full Irish, which is devoid of the Scottish potato bread, haggis and black pudding, with the Irish eating white pudding, which is the same product without the pig blood, but personally I much prefer the pig blood. The traditional thing to do after breakfast is to get in a London black cab and do the black cab tours in Belfast, which are a local industry of showing tourists the major sites and giving them the history of the Troubles by the people who lived through it. They can cost up to £100 and have become a bit of a local joke, so we got a friend of a friend to take us about. With his father actually having been in the IRA, we decided to do some Irish Republican tours first. So these are peace walls, and a fellow we're with just told us that back in the day, when he was a nipper, they put up these bloody things, and of course then the communities on one side knew that they were separate from the other side. And they're called peace walls because they're meant to maintain peace between the both sides. But of course, if you tell people very physically that they're two different communities, and they need a big wall to separate them, it's like two dogs, where you have a barrier in between them, and they're barking at each other endlessly, because they want to fight because there's a barrier. Take away the barrier, they stop barking at each other. But that's not what happened, so they come down here and fight all the time. For fun.
Fun and smaller than normal.
You would have been a good fucking KSNI
and it doesn't
officer.
have a stamp.
Yeah.
Now we're in real West Belfast, a big mark with no fucking number. Let's go.
The first major spot for such tours are the many peace walls between the two communities, but there is one very famous one which divides particularly strong communities, which still have gates being closed between them at night. Oh, so this is like they put...
Everybody's language.
That's fucking Welsh!
There's Ulster Scots there.
That's Ulster Scots.
Yeah, that's Irish.
I got it mixed up, I didn't even see that.
Fair for ye. So this is Irish, this is Ulster Scots, and then this is Welsh over here.
Yeah.
With the Ulster Loyalist side, those who want to remain with the UK, putting up Heroes of the British, and then the Irish Republican side, which has Republican murals, but is mostly about other conflicts, weirdly enough, with the Spanish Civil War, Palestine, and Kurdistan. Baby killer, 30,000 people.
Aye.
Oh, it's in Turkish. Yeah. It's fucking Turks coming here being like, screw this guy.
But you see where I live? You know what would happen? We'd all go out drinking one night, be on the way home in a taxi or something, and you just come around the corner and out the back road and there'd be there boys with balaclavas and guns, and they'd be like, right, what are you, Catholic or Protestant? And if you got it wrong, boom, 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 you're all dead.
What if you were not Catholic or Protestant?
You're dead.
The worker is the slave of the capitalist society. The woman is the slave of that slave.
That's Barack. No,
Is that Obama? What the fuck? That's the worst Obama I've ever seen.
So remember we were saying he wouldn't be the socialism of today. So he wrote loads of books and he's got loads of quotes, right? So one of his great quotes is, and this is in, not sure when it was, but it was nearly before he died. I've long been of the opinion that the socialist movement elsewhere was to a great extent hampered by the presence in its ranks of faddists and cranks who were in the movement not for the cause of socialism, but because they thought they saw it in a means of ventilating their theories on such questions as sex, religion, vaccination, vegetarianism, etc. And I believe such ideas had or ought to have no place in our programme or in our party. So see all the woke shit? He was calling that out in fucking 1905 or something. And he's now their hero.
Yeah. In 1905, James Connolly was like, we got to get rid of wokeism. The left's gone too far, I tell you.
People would cross the bottom of the motorway to the big tower, the whole way up the Falls Road to the Royal Hospital, and then go down the Grosvenor Road to where we came out. It's a massive triangle. And in 3rd of July 1970, British Army took 3,000 soldiers and vehicles without warning and just surrounded the whole area.
Okay.
And there was no weapons, there was very, very, very few weapons. And this is a lie, because on the around December 1969 is when the IRA broke apart. That's why they call it the official IRA, because they stayed.
This is the
with
provisional
the
and the official.
And then another organisation formed which called themselves the Provisional IRA. Yeah. So basically, the Provisional IRA had no weapons, so they couldn't defend the area. So weapons were brought up from Dundalk and Dublin and stuff. Very few, and it happened very quick. And there were old weapons from World War II and World War I. And these men defended the area, so they did. There's a lot of lies was told about this for years, where members of the Provisional IRA went on documentaries because members of the official IRA don't talk about what they done. So the organisation, the company of the IRA that did this was a company called D Company, and because all the streets were narrow streets and all the alleyways run in, all the streets run parallel and the other streets ran lateral through them, so they were able to come out of all the entries and attack the British Army and go back in again. For that reason they were called the Dogs, the Dirty Dogs. That was the IRA, and then in December 1969 the Provisional IRA wanted to take it into a sectarian war, and the old school members, Liam McMillan and Jim Sullivan and that, didn't want a sectarian war. They were told, you're going to get an influx of members here, most of them will be from the Celtic clubs and stuff like that. It's all sectarianism, we basically don't want it. We're here to defend our areas against the British Army, we're not here for a sectarian war.
Okay.
We don't want to be killing fucking Polish, that's not what it's about. It's about our areas being invaded by a foreign force, the fucking British Army. Now, like I was saying about the first rebellion of 1788, they had to switch it because the first rebellion was all Presbyterians and Protestants, who were all the first people of the first plantation that came over from Scotland, England and Wales in 1600s. So 100 odd years later they all intertwined, integrated into the Irish. They wanted a populated Ireland. That didn't work. All the rebellions have been shot down. So these men would have their influence from those men of the old. They're like United Irishmen.
Hang on.
Yeah, that's just been written in.
They're vandalising their own murals.
Yeah.
Is that even how you spell Palestine?
The Palestinian stuff is going to be a constant theme, with the IRA seeing itself as a sister cause to the Palestinians against Israel. In fact, so strong a theme that the Ulster Loyalists took up the cause of Israel in response, which is a bit odd, considering that the two sides fighting in the Middle East couldn't give less of a crap about Northern Ireland. Nearby you can find buildings still showing bullet damage from the battles that were fought here, along with civilian buildings that were once requisitioned and served as military outposts. Nearby is an Irish Republican museum to document their side of the story, which is full of all sorts of neat stuff, with a museum on a street in which houses used to stand, which were occupied by ethnic Irish, but were burnt down. So we're just in the Republican Museum, and there's this old picture with all these Catholic houses that have been burnt out because the Protestants wanted to get them out of this area. And it's here. You can see literally the burnout there of where one of the houses used to be. And there was a row of houses here, and obviously they're all gone. And after they were burnt out, You can see this thing at the end of the road. Another peace barrier. And it just goes and goes and goes into a dead end. Free Palestine. And then goes the opposite way. So there's basically that big one we just went to, with all the murals on it, and that's the famous one where all the American tourists come and take pictures, because the murals are there, it looks very good. And it's still in operation, it still gets closed at certain times. But it's not the only one. These peace walls are everywhere, and they're still there. Around the back of these walls, if you look, you can find people who have put up cages over their back gardens, as the communities on the other side are known to throw stuff over the walls. And our Republican tour guide took us next to the local cemetery, which houses many murals to those who died for the Republican cause. 1797.
Yep.
All the way to 72 there.
So as you see, the last one there was May 93. So I would have been 8 years old. I don't remember that. So I don't. But I remember Pierce Jordan being shot. So I do.
So this is the Socialist Workers' Party?
Yeah, that represents no division. That represents handshaking across the divide. So
what, between Catholic and Protestant?
Yes, because the Workers' Party are non-secular.
Ah, right.
Right, but their leadership would be like a lot of my Uncle Sean's friends would be. So Paddy McAllister, Jerry, and there's a couple of names here that I can't remember. It's they would have fought in the Spanish Civil War, so they actually would have been over there fighting in the Spanish Civil War. So they would. So these are all good men who all died for their area. So they are. My dad will be the last one to go on this, so he will.
This particular graveyard was having a Republican funeral for those who were killed on operations, planting a car bomb in Gibraltar to bomb the British, when a loyalist threw grenades into the crowd of the mourners at the cemetery before running on foot and shooting at the IRA men chasing him down. Amazingly, the men kept running after the gunman despite being unarmed, and with only hope that he could not kill them all. The killer was sentenced to 684 years imprisonment, and after 13 years, he was released under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. With everyone's crimes during the Troubles? I'm just going to call it a civil war. That's what it was. It was a civil war between two sides of Northern Ireland. Don't at me. So everyone who had committed crimes during that time was just let out. And this guy, after being let out after 13 years, well, what do you think he did? Well, he immediately went out and tried to kill IRA men again. The final stop on the Republican tour has to be the Sinn Féin HQ with its large Bobby Sands mural on the side of the building. Next door is a Kurdish barber and a Irish language school, which is probably a good time to talk about the language situation of this place. Now, in the North and in the Republic, pretty much everyone just speaks English all of the time. That is the de facto actual language. However, in both places, it is the case that in law, Irish and English are both official languages. But in reality, you find that in very small amounts. For example, on government signage, road signs, or if you're an Irish Republican who wants to show off how you're way more Irish than the other Irish Republicans. And we got some pamphlets here. As you can see, this one is in the Irish language, which, okay, yeah, means every Celtic nation we've been to is a dual language nation. So instead of English, they have Pubail Lusahoi Garbathus Inar. Oh, good lord. I know, yeah, I'm not even going to try, it's going to get too insulting. But you can see this is in Irish, and people speak that. Very few people, but we're in Ulster. We're in Northern Ireland. So, of course, they have something else called Ulster Scots, which is apparently a dialect of English. I'm not very convinced, but we'll see. Tak a keek a hu fuk lead thuns oye sign in Egypt and lana boots the leaf o taki booty near han ye cum on a Ween's doll made for wood. Right, I think I might understand what that last bit says. So here you'll come across a child, so weans, because you wean a child, so that the child becomes weans. So you come on a weans, so you come on a child's doll, made for wood, made of wood. It's a thing. Ulster Scots are very much a thing out here. Though it's just, if you're English, you're not going to get it. I think maybe if you speak Scots, if you're Scottish and you speak Scots, you'll understand it. But Scots is sort of legible to an Englishman who speaks English. You can sort of understand most of what they're saying. Ulster Scots, I'm out. I can't do it. Sorry. Not trying to be rude, just genuinely do not understand what's going on there.
Lesson 1. Everyday manners. Hello.
Alright.
Please go away and stop annoying me.
Fuck off and give my head pierce.
Are you staring at me?
What the fuck are you looking at?
Can I borrow a cigarette?
Gives a fag.
And speaking of the Ulster Scots loyalists, they have their own tours to give, not just the Republican side. And loyalism is far easier to find in Northern Ireland. With their flags being pretty much up in every loyalist street, it was helped by it being marching season when we visited, but I was told that most places have them stay up all year, as flags are a way to mark territory. Also, they look pretty cool, with a myriad of flags flying for the Orange Order, Scotland, the unofficial Northern Irish flag, and they also decorate their public utilities. See? Please wake up. Please wake up. The marching season that we saw in Scotland is much bigger here, with the crescendo being a massive bonfire made of wooden pallets, normally adorned with symbols of what loyalists hate, because they're going to burn it, and topped with some kind of political symbol of that year. And this year, with the illegal channel crossings being the big story that the government had promised to stop for years but never has. So they put up a dinghy and set fire to it.
Lesson 2. On the street. Did you donate any firewood?
Hey boy, did you collect for this pony?
Now on the mainland, this is considered a pretty serious crime. Would probably get you put in jail, regardless of what you think of the law. That's just how things go. But the United Kingdom is not a nation of laws. They do not enforce the law because it's the law. The United Kingdom is a nation of cost-benefit. And in Northern Ireland, the costs of enforcing the law here, interfering with the loyalists in their traditions, are not worth it. The benefit of enforcing the law is not there versus the costs. And so in Northern Ireland, these communities are able to do these sort of things, which they would not be able to get away with on the mainland, because the police make the assessment that it's not in their interests. They also have Orange Order gates at areas symbolizing that you are entering their territory, and other major aspects of loyalist neighborhoods being the endless war memorials and murals on the sides of houses, which really do just blend into all parts of life, with the murals really stealing the show in terms of being really cool. However, not all are equal, and some modern ones have been put up which really have no soul whatsoever. But the worst crime has to be that I was informed that the local government pays the organizations to paint over the stuff that is on those murals that is considered too extreme for the modern day. And you can see this in probably the most cool mural being completely erased in place of some crap about women's knitting. You know, as a tourist, I wouldn't come to Belfast to see that. But I would come to Belfast to see this. The women's quilt. I mean, great, you know, I got nothing against the women who are doing this. You know, you want to do that, fine, but you had to go tear down something that was cool. So these are all the children who were killed?
Yes. Children murdered by Sinn Féin IRA.
Okay. Murdered while pushing her doll's pram by a ricocheting bullet. Murdered along with both parents from a landmine. Shot in the chest at home by terrorists. Blown up while playing cowboys and Indians when he stepped on a planted landmine. Murdered sitting in the family car outside of his home when a bomb planted by Sinn Féin exploded. And then this is adults. Oh.
Sun bleached a little bit, but
I just didn't think we'd come here and see Diane Abbott, but she's there. I'm not even going to read this. I don't care what is written here. The fact they hate Alistair Campbell makes me agree with them. The legacy of Sinn Féin, Northern Ireland: mass murder, mayhem, rape, mutilation, robbery, drugs, child abuse, kangaroo courts. Why have they... like, paedophilia has been added there. There's something underneath. What was underneath?
I don't know.
What is worse than calling someone a paedophile? And it's Jerry Adams. So I was told that this pub here used to be a torture den. And it's in a Protestant area, so Protestant pro-British Union types used to come to this pub, and then somewhere in here, maybe upstairs or in a basement, they used to torture traitors to the movement. Since then, the pub has closed down, been abandoned. But like everywhere in this damn city, it's not been forgotten. And to be honest, that's what Troubles tourism has kind of become in Northern Ireland. It's something which is the number one thing that tourists want to see, and yet the local administration spends all their time trying to just tone it down ever so more. As for modern day political subjects in Northern Ireland, for left-wing types there is large interest in Palestine, nothing really that unique, except that the protesters here were wearing Palestine Action t-shirts, which in the United Kingdom is a prescribed terrorist group, and offering moral support is a crime under the Terrorism Act, which on the mainland, this is enforced, and people wearing such shirts are arrested. Here, yet again, the police, even though they're there in armoured cars, do not enforce the law. They see people breaking the Terrorism Act and make the cost-benefit analysis that in this part of the kingdom, not worth it. Down in London, instant arrest. Up in Northern Ireland, gonna leave the communities alone. As for more local concerns, migrant hotels are the main issue, exactly the same as the rest of the United Kingdom, with a protest here being about a migrant hotel that was placed directly opposite a nursery, which is for children under the age of 4. These protesters fly united British and Irish symbols and are attended by, again, armoured police cars. And the police here, unlike anywhere else under British rule, are armed, with some of the ladies here being from Ballymena. Ballymena is famous because it is a local Northern Irish town which had riots in response to a local child being raped by foreigners, with houses that are rented by foreigners being burnt down to punish the landlords for renting them out to them. Now, this may be an example in which those organizations from earlier still kind of exist, because it is rumored that the child who was raped was a family member or related to someone who is in one of those organizations. So when something happens to one of your own, there's a pretty serious response from the community. I decided to follow these ladies to another protest that was in Ballymena, this time outside of a car wash, which is alleged to illegally employ EU citizens who can break into Northern Ireland from the south, as the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland have no physical border under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement. And you'd also take a tour of the streets in which the houses were being burnt out, which is pretty much the only thing to do in Ballymena, which is why it was recently rated as the worst place for tourism in all of Ireland. It did, however, give me a chance to try Northern Irish McDonald's, which is sadly nothing unique. Unlike Scotland, at least they had iron brew. The next day we woke up and headed in for breakfast, yet again with one of those breakfast stacks, at a local cafe, which is one of the most patriotic I've ever seen in the entire United Kingdom. But this day was for neutral zones. Firstly, the Belfast St. George Market, which is rarely open, but inside you can find basically all kinds of tat being sold to tourists, alongside a large international food area, which only sells one Northern Irish speciality, which is of course the breakfast stacks. There is also the Northern Irish Parliament, which, like all of the UK devolved parliaments, you can just wander in, but not on the weekend, which is when I happen to be there. The other main attraction in Belfast being the Titanic Museum, but after you're done paying for parking, tickets for a family of 5 come to £165 British pounds. So we left. Because screw that, I'm not paying that kind of money to go to a museum. What are you, crazy? So we went to the much better, and I recommend going instead to the much better Ulster Museum, which is free, which goes over the history of this region from the Mud Hut era all through the ages to the excitement of the modern day and the Civil War, with bomb robots, anti-Republic propaganda, a sign from the show Derry Girls showing the differences between Catholics and Protestants, but most amazingly, the actual revolver belonging to Michael Collins, which hero of the Republic of Ireland, and yet Ulster somehow managed to steal the guy's revolver. The other neutral zone being downtown Belfast, which once upon a time did actually have countermeasures to stop the bombings, but these days all sides would rather have it be a hub of tourists and people having nights out. It even has become the gay capital of Ireland, as decided by me, because I doubt even Dublin has homo-Leninism. Okay, so every time I do these things, I do like to taste local snacks. Got a couple of things. First thing, Yellow Man. No idea what that is. I'm not sure you ever wanted to put a Yellow Man in my mouth, but here we go. I mean, it looks like honeycomb, but also not, because it looks like it's been dyed yellow with some kind of unnatural colouring. Anyway. Wow. Oh, God. Ah. It was not like honeycomb. It's a lot stickier. And it's now stuck all over my mouth. Ah, it hurts. Okay. I don't know how to describe the flavour. It sort of tastes like chemicals. But not bad chemicals. The next day I decided to head out of Belfast, and despite the warnings about public transport, I headed to the west on a local train, which seemed to function perfectly well, first stop being to the one natural wonder of Northern Ireland that attracts hordes of tourists, the Giant's Causeway. Now this is actually cool enough to be worth a visit, because hexagons are bestagons, but getting to the damn thing is a heck of a walk, with many American tourists turning back upon seeing that you actually have to walk, not drive, to the wonder. With a steep drop down the staircase, carved into the hills, but upon arrival it does feel worth it. But there is one major scam here, being that the government can't really monetize a natural wonder, so they have set up a visitor center and try and trick you into believing that you need to buy a ticket from them to visit, which you don't. And all the ticket does is get you into the visitor center. In fact, whilst I was walking around, I could hear American tourists genuinely pissed off, angrily saying to people, why the hell would I pay to get into a shop? Like, if you let me in the shop, I'll spend money. I'm American. I'm going to buy tat. But I'm not going to pay to get into the shop. Are you crazy? Getting back onto the train, my evening was to be spent in another town, filled with controversy. So much so that no one even agrees on what this place is called, with loyalists referring to it as Londonderry, and Republicans calling it Derry. Now, someone who really doesn't care, I'm just going to call it whatever the hell I feel like at the time. The area used to be called Derry, but when colonization began under the Ulster Plantation, a city was established called Londonderry. The city achieved infamy from when it was besieged by a Catholic king in the Glorious Revolution. When the king demanded that they surrender, they refused, and held out long enough for the Protestant rival to relieve the city, to which the phrase "no surrender" became the battle cry of loyalists and Protestants in the north. When the War for Irish Independence began, Derry became a battleground between the police, British military, and loyalists fighting off the IRA. After a year of bloodshed, when Ireland was partitioned, Londonderry would end up staying in the United Kingdom on that side, but was now a border city. So, years later, it would once again become the front line, and British authority quickly collapsed, especially after the British Parachute Regiment shot dead 26 civilian protesters, which led to the British Embassy in Dublin being burnt down. The city ended up divided between the Loyalist side and a Republican self-declared Free Derry, being off-limits to British forces. So much so that the British deployed 27,000 troops with tanks and Air Force assistance to reclaim that part of the city in 1972, in the process killing one unarmed IRA member and murdering a 15-year-old civilian, which led to more bombings. All of this is to say that even after the peace treaty, this place is still kind of bitterly divided. Upon arrival, you get off the train station, which is on one side of the river, which is still Protestant Ulster Loyalist. But to get into town, you have to cross an EU-funded peace bridge. And upon entering Londonderry, it clearly has had some investment with its very pretty parks and town hall, which has had very beautiful stained glass windows with the history of the town over time. Walking around the mostly neutral town centre, you can find some neat stuff like the Derry Girls mural, and walk along the city walls and its very cute shops. But on this side of the river, there is still one Protestant holdout, and they've painted their sidewalk and murals declaring no surrender in a city where they were once the majority but are now just a small minority. Even the street walk here is British. And then you get to the wall and it stops. I'm a Protestant, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Protestant, I'm a Catholic, I'm a Catholic. But once you head to the western half of the city, you will get to see the Derry side of Londonderry, with its very famous Free Derry Corner, which is absolutely plastered with Republican symbols and murals, for those who fought, died, and allegedly still fight for it. With symbols supporting organisations which are prescribed as terrorist groups by the UK state, which naturally the Irish Republicans take no notice of this ban, and display symbols of the IRA, the Irish National Liberation Army, and Palestine Action. And there was also some graffiti in support of Hamas. And yet again, the Police Service of Northern Ireland, or PSNI, are well aware that displaying such things is a crime. They're well aware that such things are being displayed, but do not enforce the law. Yet again, the cost-benefit does not make sense. Then I turned a corner and witnessed alcoholics beating the absolute crap out of each other. To which I asked a local, is this normal? What's going on? To which he just kind of looked annoyed and went, "It's a fucking disgrace," and then wandered off. So I was pretty worried. I started walking towards the hotel I'd booked for the night, which was in a deeply Republican area of the town, thinking, where the hell am I staying? Where there's just people beating each other up in the streets. Am I safe? And then as I'm walking down the streets, I noticed that literally every other door on this Republican area has their front doors just wide open. So I stop a passerby who lives there, and I'm like, hey, what the hell is this about? Why do people just leave their doors open? And the knowledge I learned was that this was community policing. If you're stupid enough to try and rob someone out there, you're going to regret it pretty quickly.
Lesson 5. The family. They are an unhygienic but practical family.
Now the type of people keep a shovel full of shade on their kitchen table to keep the flies off the butter.
Lesson 6. Love and romance. I think we should get married soon.
I'm pregnant.
The next day I decided to exit the place I was staying, and I decided it was time for me to cross the border. So I headed to the local bus stop and paid in British pounds, only to be given euros in return, to ride one stop, passing by the local British police station, which has been turned into an armoured fortress, to the Irish Republican border town of Muff. Now, before you ask, there is no local diving school. However, there is a barber's, so you don't need to ask that in the comments. This town is in stark contrast to the rest of Ulster, having the Irish, not British, Ulster flag, and is policed by not a UK militarised force, but a very quaint Irish police force known as the Garda, with Celtic symbols as their logo. But most striking is that what there is not to notice at the border. Right, so I've made it to the Republic. I'm in the southern independent state of the Republic of Ireland. And I'm in a border town. And the border town is called Muff. Lovely place, love to be there. So the border here is very weird. So as you can see, this is us crossing over from Muff over there, where they use kilometers per hour, they pay in euros, and then you've crossed and now you're in the United Kingdom, and we use miles per hour, and you pay with British pounds. And here you have the people of Derry have put up a sign saying you are entering Derry, an apartheid-free zone, Palestine flag, the usual. As you can see, there's a sign in Irish. And then, here you are, you're in the United Kingdom. I love Muff. I bet you do. But here's something I was hoping to see, but it's gone. So here's a sign. Speed limit is 60 miles per hour. You're in the UK, we do things at miles per hour, and there should be a sign here saying, "Welcome to Northern Ireland." And usually what happens with that is the Republicans will come down with some spray paint, spray over the word Northern, so it says welcome to Ireland, because they say that you're already in Ireland. That sign is gone. From Muff, I decided to head back to Belfast, as from Belfast there is a direct train to Dublin, whose service is in Irish and English, and when I arrived, it was on fire. The train pulled into Colony Station, named after the legendary socialist Republican James Colony, with a large mural explaining his importance, but as I was filming, some Polish drunk turned up and started arguing with the security at the station, who from their accents were all Latinos. So I headed out of the train station and walked onto the streets of Dublin, which were incredibly dirty, and couldn't help but notice that everyone I walked past on the street on the way to town was what the Dublin government calls the New Irish, with tents filled with illegal migrant rejects from the UK, who are then trying to claim in Ireland after being rejected. And I arrived at the two things which allegedly symbolize modern Dublin, being the Spire, which is an incredibly boring spike with no meaning, and the Portal, which is a live stream showing Poland. It used to show New York City before someone ruined that. So I met up with a local subscriber and we headed into an Irish pub for a pint of Guinness and Guinness Irish stew, which is to the right on the political culinary compass. So there's a drinking game here called Split the G. So you've got to drink the Guinness and then get it down to the G. I haven't had Guinness in years. Last time I had it, I hated it. But I'm told it tastes different in Ireland, so let's give it a go. Alright, chin chin. Fucking neither of us did it. I got to like the very top. What happens if you win? Does the other person have to do a dare or something?
Free beer for everybody.
Oh, right. That's not as bad as I remember it. That's actually okay. It really does taste different in Ireland. That's weird. My first impressions of Dublin were not great. The place is clearly in need of a hero. But I must say that the Irish pubs are far superior in quality to the English ones, with a larger emphasis on the atmosphere, Ireland very much being a nation of pubs. And the next day I headed into Dublin for two big things I saw every video mention which caught my eye. Firstly being the Emigration Museum, which is an entire museum dedicated to the history of the Irish people leaving Ireland, endlessly, not only during the famine. Now, the museum is basically divided into three parts, with the first third being entirely about the evils of the English government, deporting the Irish at the first opportunity.
It's the queer boy we should be locking up and throw away the key.
Well, let's hope he's learnt from his old-fashioned beat.
There's no place for his type in Dublin. What he gets up to is an abomination, not to mention illegal.
As a magistrate, I could commit this wanton woman to an Irish jail. But such greedy, underhand behaviour warrants a harsher penalty. 7 years on Van Diemen's land is the sentence. She may take the brat.
We should act as we did in Drogheda. Our General Cromwell showed no mercy towards Catholic scum.
We have many in safe custody for the Barbados.
And a good riddance. If they survive the voyage, a life of servitude is more than they just deserve.
The second third naturally follows, with it claiming that no matter where you are, if you have Irish blood, Ireland will always be your home, as you are connected to the land. But this does lead to a kind of insane argument, in which the museum claims that just about everyone ever is Irish, including Barack Obama. Now, Barack Obama's father is a Kenyan man who was in Hawaii for studying, and Barack Obama's mother is an American woman of English ancestry, but she did have some Welsh, Scottish, and Irish ancestors. This is pretty normal for the UK. And so, they got together in Hawaii, got married for a short time before getting divorced, but whilst they were together, they did have a child, Barack Obama. And now this means that Barack Obama's great-great-grandfather was an Irishman, which according to the blood and soil argument of this museum, means Barack Obama is an Irishman. Which is kind of insane, and regardless of your viewpoint on which argument is true, gets even more insane because the last third of the museum suddenly takes the blood and soil argument that they're making and throws it out the window, and instead focuses on the fact that if you've got an Irish passport, that's what really makes you Irish. The display contains a series of interviews of which a Kurdish man who grew up in Iraqi Kurdistan claims that getting the Irish passport has made him Irish, and a transgender claiming that the passport accepting their chosen gender also makes that claim valid. Which is absolutely insane given the slogan of the museum is everyone comes from somewhere, only to do a 180 at the very end of the museum and argue that wherever you come from doesn't matter, in fact. The past isn't relevant. What's relevant is the present. There are sections on Irish sport and culture, such as pubs and Irish hurling and Irish football, which is a very unique sport to the Irish, but nothing in that museum stands out just as much as the insanely confused discussion it demands to have with you. The other major attraction, which I've heard a lot about in Dublin, is the Guinness factory, which is not so much a factory tour as it is a propaganda factory, as you walk through what I can only describe as an art exhibit, which is meant to inform you how Guinness is made, but in reality is just Instagram porn, and is very enjoyable. And when you hit the top, there is a fresh pint for you to drink whilst overlooking the city. And some sad news is that the rumours are that Guinness doesn't travel very well, and it pretty much starts decaying immediately from when it's made. So that's why when you have it outside of Ireland, it tastes a bit worse. And I'm here to report that that's true, because normally I can't stand the bloody stuff. But then in the factory and in Ireland in general, drinking it there, it tastes a hell of a lot better. The people at Guinness are also just unbelievably smart when it comes to advertising, with a whole section on their work. The best being their solution to the fact that it takes forever to pour Guinness, which means most bars hate it, which is why they rebranded Guinness as good things come to those who wait. And they have managed to convince many to incorporate it into food dishes, expanding its utility. I spent the rest of the day wandering the streets, finding neat small things of interest, such as the local Irish travellers, who are de facto an ethnic group of their own, being the Irish who refused to join the modern world in the 1700s, and have stayed nomadic ever since. Now in England, naturally they have gotten a very negative reputation, which is usually spun in polite society as some kind of ethnic hatred or racial hatred against the Irish, and evidence of how the English are kind of bigoted. Except, what I've discovered is the very dirty secret in Ireland is that the Irish also hate, and I mean hate, Irish travellers and want nothing to do with them. So that's that. We finished up the night by getting drunk with some local lads, and got the local drunk food, which is known as a spice bag. The next day I got up and got myself a chicken roll, which is the local cure for a hangover, and checked out the Garden of Remembrance, the Dublin Castle, which is where the British administration of Ireland used to be run, and the Irish Republic's Parliament, which is called the Dáil. However, unlike the devolved parliaments in Celtic Wales and Scotland, you cannot just wander in. The major debates outside of the Parliament, again being Palestine, and now the housing crisis. The only other major part of Dublin worth mentioning, I thought, would be the American companies that are based in the very nice part of town, such as Google, whose skyscrapers sit next to quaint old Dublin houses, with the surroundings being the kind of progressive messages you would expect, and their local shops being a spa, with ridiculous prices. And then one other thing I did actually fall in love with when visiting was Irish crosswalks, the little noise they make. It just brings me joy. But beyond that, Dublin is so expensive to be in. It has nice stuff, but the costs of hotels will utterly destroy your budget. Alright, so I've been staying with people who I've met, or friends I suppose, now that I've met them, around Dublin, because the hotel prices around here are bloody insane. And that's not lastminute.com, that's just half of the hotels are taken up by refugees, and then the other half, well, it's Dublin. I mean, what's weird is this place is extremely like London, but the cost of living is the big difference. For some reason, this place is more expensive than London, which is madness. So this is the hotel I got for this night, because I wanted to be in the centre, but then I'm immediately leaving because I can't really justify the cost. And a couple of good things. It is just like England. We've got the bath, which every time I go to America, I miss how tall this bath is. British baths are the best in the world. American baths are made for toddlers. And the other big thing being double taps. I kind of find it, I mean, this is going to be weird, not a lot of people can understand this, but British people find it disgusting to not have two taps, because we get our tap water from the cold tap and the hot tap. Back in the day, you would not get your tap water from, because it was... So I decided to get out and head for the train station that would take me as far west as possible, to Galway. Now, I did find something that British viewers are going to find kind of weird, because in all British railway stations, you'll find these murals to the First and Second World War for everyone who served in the railway company who died in the Great Wars. And these are put up by the railway companies to remember their staff from all kinds of stratas of society who died. And Ireland would have been part of the First World War, and they died in droves out there, so you would expect their train stations to have these murals, at least for the First World War. But they don't. Which is doubly weird, because when you go to Northern Ireland, up in Belfast and Londonderry, they actually do have those murals for those who died. But down in the Republic, kind of ignored. Right, so I made it to Galway. And Galway so far is very much like Dublin, which means it's very much like London. Lots of tourists, lots of people who are settling from all over the world. And what is it? A place where they just haven't built enough, so it's kind of overcrowded and expensive. And I mean, the hotel I stayed here was 150 quid. That was the cheapest I could find. 150 quid a night. Yeah, no thanks. It's just not fun being here with everything being such in demand. So I woke up, thought before I go to Anspielen, I'll go get some breakfast. And you can go to a breakfast cafe and buy a full Irish, or the hotel offered one which was 10 euros for some slices of cheese. So I thought, no, I'll go to the supermarket, do the sensible thing, get something cheap. Problem is, you turn the corner and it's a Tesco. And for anyone who's not British or Irish, if you're ever a tourist in these places and you see Tesco's, run. Because my god, they're just the worst company on earth. Now in theory, Tesco should be a decent average tier grocery store, and they do offer a selection of Irish products such as Irish butter, Irish bread, Irish whiskey, white pudding, Irish ice cream, and steak. With Irish beef being genuinely some of the best on earth. And this is a good point to mention some of the oddities in Irish stores, with extremely large selections of cakes, soda bread, and their alcohol is behind the rest of all the other goods in a age-segregated section with limited hours. Now, Ireland is quite difficult to be in because of the horrific prices, because the cost of living out there is just so expensive. But the company Tesco's is insistent on ruining your life. So they introduced during COVID the idea that they would have two price systems. One for those who are under 16 with a club card, which no tourist would ever think about, of getting one. And if you don't have it, you're a second-class citizen. You face an incredibly artificially inflated pricing system, sometimes as high as double of the actual price. And with the club card, you don't actually save any money. This isn't a discounted price for members. This is the actual price, which is also inflated, with them admitting this by having something which is Aldi price matching, with Aldi being a budget store which sells the same good. So all they're saying is, if it's Aldi price matched, you're getting the actual price, a decent price, and if it's not, we're just screwing you over. Aldi is cheaper for the same product that we're giving you a fake discount on, which is not a discount, it's an inflated price. And this leads to just insane costs, even for Ireland, such as the local meal deal being €6 or 5.5 depending on your class status. So I decided to get the cheaper breakfast meal deal and a couple of other snacks, and that came to €16.50. Absolutely insane prices. And nowhere else have I travelled on Earth do they do this. No one else, no other country decides that, oh, we're going to treat our customers as a two-tier system in which there are just different prices for different people depending on if they have... No, like Costco will charge you a membership in money, and then you make it back by the savings you get by buying in bulk. Tesco's is just a normal store. No other place I've been on Earth has a normal store do this to their customers, this kind of abuse, and all they do is just massively inflate the prices above the rate of inflation as well, to screw over their own customers. So if you're in Ireland or the UK, avoid at all costs. So I decided to take a long walk down the road from Galway to a place known as a Gaeltacht, an area of majority Irish speakers. I travelled west to a place known as Speed, something Irish, hoping to find an Irish language community and see in what ways life was different. Firstly, checking out the local library, which did have books there in all Irish, including a translation book, so that when an Irishman visits England, he can still ask for white pudding and pig's trotters, so he won't go hungry. Now, the town itself is cute enough with a long history and rumoured to still produce their own Irish moonshine, but sadly I had little luck finding any Irish speakers speaking Irish, as the place was full to the brim with tourists, Londoners, and European citizens. Now, the tourists here are one thing, makes sense, but the displacement of the natives to such an extent is kind of horrific, and you can see it when walking around. There are signs up, handmade signs, begging for housing from locals, little handwritten things saying, please give me a place. And one of them incredibly cutely said that they were 2 women of respectable age looking for housing. That's how bad the housing crisis is. Realizing I wasn't going to get that Irish experience, I decided to go for another, which is the only Irish fast food chain of note, Supermacs, which sounds and looks like a fake McDonald's for a video game, but is actually just an Irish burger brand. For some reason, they are all paired with Papa John's, and the quality of the food is actually quite decent for the price, in my opinion. It was also the closest I got to an Irish-speaking community, as the radio was in Irish language.
Lá sé a glór áhaidin faoin laidú atá takeíim líana an líon grádaní an ord.
And with that, I decided, screw it, I'll just get on the bus back to Galway and go see what I can do there. When I got back, Galway was incredibly pretty, if a bit rainy, but I did meet up with a local man to ask some more questions about the Irish. So I'm in Galway, and the best way I find to get knowledge is always to ask local people. So I would like to introduce Local Man. So whenever you talk about Ireland online, you get a lot of Irish interest, there's some British interest, but the number 3 or even biggest group I find online that's interested are the American diaspora of the Irish, so Irish Americans. And then there's all these rumours about how the Irish view them and whatnot, so I'm wondering what's true, what's not. How do the Irish view them, and then what do you feel like when they come back to Ireland and say, I'm just as Irish as you, or things like this?
Yeah, I mean, you would get a wrong perspective from the online conversation. I mean, generally, I think the feeling to Americans in the diaspora is really positive. And people have long history of positive experiences with them in terms of, they come here for tourism, they're quite generous, they're quite affable, they have a love for the country. So I think people are generally quite fond of them. But there is this hostility that's very new, actually. I've even noticed it increase in the last few years, where online leftists, pro-immigration people take this super hostile position towards the diaspora. And it's this thing of you're not Irish, you're not real Irish, remind the Yanks who they are, you'll always just be American, you're not one of us, you don't understand the culture, this kind of thing. But it's always, you see who's posting that, and it's always someone that's the Nigerian that arrived here 3 years ago and got papers is as Irish as anyone else. So it's just weird, I think it is rooted in trying to divorce Irishness from any kind of blood ties, and it's actually just cultural understanding. So yeah, the Nigerian guy that's lived here a few years and maybe he's played Gaelic football and he has the crack, he's Irish, but the guy who's fully ethnically Irish that grew up in the US has no connection to it. But that's totally out of step with the history of how people viewed that question, because you'll see people that would identify, these leftists that identify as Republicans or support Sinn Féin, a lot of them would engage in that. But I mean, if you look at how Irish nationalists viewed it historically, they saw it, Irish Americans as our blood brothers, wanted to create a country that would be prosperous enough that many of them could return. The whole history of the national struggle, oftentimes they would go to the US and seek support. I mean, during the War of Independence, Eamon de Valera, who was officially the president of the Republic, undeclared. I mean, he spent most of it in the US seeking support from Irish Americans, and without that, there probably wouldn't have been a War of Independence. They basically funded the whole thing.
After this, I headed north, as I had been given a tip-off to an Irish cultural festival, which had been forced to go underground, thanks to being called far-right. So I went to go and see what all the fuss was about, and see if I could find some more Irish culture. The event turned out to be a very wholesome festival featuring Irish music, traditional Irish woolwork, such as sock making, face painting, and speakers filling a hall to the brim, with speakers giving very romantic and poetic speeches about what Ireland means to them and the Irish people. Celts, in my experience, after travelling to all of these different Celtic nations, are far more romantic and poetic people than the Anglo-Saxons.
My name is Stephen Kerr and I'm one of the organisers here of the Misha Era Festival taking place in Castlebar, County Mayo today. We have nearly 1,000 attendees here today to celebrate Irish music and culture, and it's been a fantastic day. A lot of very happy, friendly, fun people enjoying themselves and celebrating our culture and our heritage.
The attendees all seemed pretty typical of what you would expect of an Irish cultural festival to consist of, even blasting Irish revolutionary music out the front. The whole thing was pretty neat, but what was amazing is the fact that it had been forced to go underground because the previous host had bailed on them because they were called far right, and yet the new host was able to completely sell out tickets, so the place was to the brim with people wanting to come and, well, celebrate Irish culture. It seems that the Irish political culture is basically the same as in Britain, except 10 years ago, and they're still in that stage of discussion. Now, I was going to head south and go all the way down to Cork after this. However, Ireland's bus and train service is entirely centred around the idea that you want to get to Dublin. And the idea that you don't want to get to Dublin, and instead travel north or south, doesn't really exist to the Ministry of Transport. So I got on the first bus, and because it was slightly late, I missed the second bus, and there's no more for the rest of the evening. So my options were go to Dublin or go to Dublin. So I went to Dublin. Thankfully, I was saved by a subscriber from being homeless for the evening, and the next day was Sunday, so we spent it wandering around his local town to discover the tale of Sammy the Seal. There is a fish butcher's here that caught the eye of a seal that decided it wanted some free food. So every day the fishmonger would feed Sammy right up until his death, and to this day people gather around with a new fishmonger feeding Sammy to onlookers' amazement. Sadly, this day, Sammy did not arrive, but the legend is alive and well. Now, whilst wandering around, we did run into some Americans by coincidence and made friends and had dinner, and I'm going to dub one of them Dr. Redpill. And the legend of Dr. Redpill is amazing, because he works in medicine, but not in like an ER or something like that. So when COVID came, he was living in Ireland, and he didn't want to wait in the queue. You know, there's massive queues to get into the supermarkets to get your food. So what he did is he purchased a lab coat and some gloves that looked like they're from a hospital, and then went to the front of the queue and said, "I'm a doctor." And the security and everyone in the queue just went, "Oh yes, of course, he must go first." So he'd skip the queue every time. So one day he's going down there in his little lab coat and goes to the front and says, "I'm a doctor." And they say, "Oh, go ahead, please, thank you for your service." And the lady at the front of the queue grabs him by the arm and then says to him, "Doctor, how is it in there?" So he turned around, looked at this little lady in her mask, and went, "Everyone's dead." And then just walked in, brought his shopping and went home. There was one final place I wished to see in Ireland, and this was in the southern town of Waterford. Now, the town itself is a rather normal Irish town, with its history going back to the Viking raids and Oliver Cromwell's invasion with a cannonball stuck in time in the local tower that Cromwell fired at the town. But Waterford is also known for a local rock which had always had Irish Republican causes painted over it, such as references to the hunger strikes from the north. And in recent times, someone had put up Palestinian flags over the Irish Republican messaging, to which some local lads decided to paint over an Irish tricolour over the Palestinian flag, which is really cool. The colours really shine through, overlooking the whole town, and by pure coincidence, it does somewhat resemble Northern Ireland. And ever since in this place, there's been a mini civil war going on between Republicans, which is more indicative of a divide between Republicans more generally in all of the Irish Republican scene, with one side being more left-wing, and in their branch focusing more on international causes, so far more interested in Palestine in these times, whereas the other side of Republicanism argues that you must be more focused on the Irish Republic, We've already got the thing. If we're going to get a united Ireland, it's not through international causes, but by making the Republic so desirable that the people in the north will want to join willingly. And there's quite a lot of problems in the Republic of Ireland. Healthcare, housing, etc. Same sort of things in the UK. And they want to get those fixed first to make Ireland something you want to join. And so these two sides are fighting each other by painting over each other on that rock, with one side painting Palestinian flags, and the next 3 hours, the other boys will turn up and paint an Irish tricolour over the whole thing. So I turned up to talk to the boys and see what that was all about.
This is the local Irish youth who will kill you if you're against Ireland.
You touch that rock, it'll be the last rock you ever touch.
Alright, so I'm here with a local painter and decorator, and I'm here to see your artwork you've been doing, and this made it quite viral. Even in England we were looking at what you've done, so could you explain why you've done this and what the purpose is?
Yeah, so first off, it took a trek to get down here, and it's a masterpiece that went viral because of the symbolism that's involved in it. So our reasoning for doing it is obviously across Europe, across the world, we see wokeism is taking over. We see political agendas that are being pushed that don't serve the home nations or the people of those nations. So we took a decision that we would come up here and make a political and also a national statement and say this is Ireland. Like we stand with anyone that suffers any plight across the world, but we do it in our way. We don't come out here pushing a political agenda onto our people to make them forcing them into an international war that really we don't have any real say in. The history of the rock, we go back like to the hunger strikers. Like it's always been used as a political apparatus here in Waterford, even with our local GAA teams, Waterford, Kilkenny, we have border wars, when they're playing each other, we put up symbolism. But like in the past, say 10 years, it's gone wokeism, from LGBT to pro-Palestine to pro-Ukraine, to negative Ireland, basically. As a scene, we came up, we painted this rock, the tricolour, and then they came back up and they painted back over for Palestine. Like, we all know that there's problems in the world with Palestine or even with Sudan or anywhere else. But the fact is that this is Ireland. We have people out on the streets that are homeless. We lose sight of what's happening in our own country, and we look to international agendas that we can't affect. The easiest thing in this life is to look at the problems far away, pretend to solve them. The hardest thing to do is to solve the problems that are created here by yourselves.
And after all that, I decided I'd seen enough of Ireland for one trip, and so got a plane and went back to the motherland on my driving licence. And on this trip, a lot of delusions got shattered. Now, the whole debate and issue in Ireland has some very sexy narratives about fighting for a united Irish nation or defending Britain until the last man is pushed back into the sea. But when you're there, that's not what's there. Firstly, with the Loyalists, which I thought I would find some kind of kinship with, being from Britain and then being pro-British. Except, you come to find the fact that these guys are Scots. They're ethnic Scots, they're Ulster Scots, big surprise. Shouldn't be a surprise, but was one. And then you don't really feel any ethnic kinship with them because we're English. I mean, it's not like we hate the Scots or any of that. It's just a different ethnic group. It's just not one you have that kinship with because they're not the same people. Whereas in Scotland, they have much more kinship with the Ulster Scots because they're both Scots. Makes sense. Whereas on the Irish Republican side of the communities, that thing's a mess. I mean, you see in Northern Ireland, these Republicans who are rabid and very energetic and want to get a united Ireland. And they're dreaming that it's going to happen any day now. And they know they've got the demographic trends on their side. Catholics have more kids than Protestants, for example. Sinn Féin's now the biggest party in North and Southern Ireland. And therefore, we're going to get it. And then you get to the Republic. And the people in the Republic are dreading the idea. I mean, the Republic of Ireland is in such a mess that it's hard to overstate. They've got all of these problems financially. The infrastructure's crumbling. They've got massive amounts of people coming in at such a rate that they literally cannot build houses fast enough to house these people. And the political class just says, completely derelict of duty about how to manage the country. And so the people of Ireland that you meet are just endlessly complaining about this or that thing being wrong. And hell, I know what that feels like, because over in the UK, we got the same problems. It's not like we're better. We're in a terrible situation back in England as well. So when the issue of Irish republicanism comes up, of unifying the North with the South, the average person in the Republic of Ireland kind of revolts at the idea. Even the Republicans I met were a bit like, one day, but not now, because we've got stuff to solve. And this is the dirty secret. Back when the Civil War was going on in Northern Ireland, the idea of the UK becoming some kind of industrialized nation and holding on to its industry meant that keeping Northern Ireland was actually quite important. I mean, Belfast is this port city, could be a hub of industry. But in the modern day, that's not happening. And the place costs £10 billion in tax revenue. That's net. We lose £10 billion every year just to pay for the upkeep of the place. It doesn't produce money. It's a massive money sink for the British. And so, in the Republic, they're a bit worried that if they got their hands on it, it would also be a massive money sink for them. So it's not so attractive as you might think. So publicly, both the UK and the Republic of Ireland have these statements about how they want wildly different things to be the outcome. But secretly, both of them very much agree that they don't want to hold on to this money sink. And so the Republican cause is way more messy than you think it would be. Anyway, I'm sure there's going to be a massive argument and discussion in the comments, and to be honest, I kind of welcome it. I'm sure I've got some stuff wrong. Always happy to learn, so do let me know. And as for if you want to support the channel and see more of these things and more of the videos, best way to do that is to subscribe at SubStar. I have this many Soviet Roubles and Ba'athist notes from Saddam Hussein's Iraq and Bashar al-Assad's Syria to send out. And you get free those for everyone who subscribes on SubStar. And that's the best way to help. Thank you to everyone who already does, sincerely. It's the only way this is possible. But if you want to help in more minor ways, best way to do that is to hit like. What that does is that YouTube will recommend this video to 10 more people, so always helps. If you want to make me feel good, hit subscribe. And if you leave a comment, I do still read every single one. Thank you, and goodbye. I'm not saying all Irish are terrorists, but this is the national uniform when you think of Ireland. I mean, what, you were expecting me to dress up as a leprechaun? Would that have been better? Would that have been less racially insensitive?